Hello, everyone, and welcome to Flying Solo Fashion Podcast. Today, we're excited to introduce you our guest Magna, the founder of Let's Curate platform, which represents nearly 100 independent brands from around the world. If you're a designer that's just starting out or a brand ready to take that next big step, this episode is for you. Magna shares incredible insights and practical advice for emerging fashion entrepreneurs navigating growth, visibility, and positioning in today's competitive industry. Magna, thank you so much for joining us.
A pleasure to be here, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So tell us more about Let's Curate. I know that there is an incredible story behind it and the mission that is even more important. So tell us everything.
Absolutely. Let's Curate in a nutshell, I would say, is a platform and a resource that empowers independent artisans. If you had to ask me describe Let's Curate in one sentence, that's what I would say. That's what it stands for. It's a collaborative space between makers and lovers of everything unique, handmade, and unique in terms of traditions that these creations bring about. And there are also artisans who take it one step ahead by making it more contemporary. So legacy and storytelling is a very, very big foundation of my brand. This is a platform for those who want to explore a path that is not about mass production or fast fashion products. Independent artisans work very deliberately. They're in a much better position to give voice to people's stories, their own stories and emotions, and create something special. This whole idea came about since a very young age, I've been traveling around the world. And there was a realization at some point, as over the course of my many travels, the more trips I took, the more I came in contact with creators who were involved in exquisite work, either based, again, like in traditional techniques that they had learned from their fathers and grandfathers, mothers, grandmothers, or they were creating their own sort of modern twist to what was a heritage based technique. And there were two things I realized. One, that these artisans, and these are not in prime cities. That was the other thing that I realized. It was not in like the big fashionable cities that I traveled to. The more I traveled to the smaller towns and, off the beaten track cities, the more I realized that these artisans themselves didn't know how unique their work was because no one had appreciated it enough. No one had seen it. And as a consequence, they didn't think it was worth their time to make it more accessible to others. So there was a whole world of, I would say, creative thought that was being lost. And when I would come back home, I would always look for platforms or websites or companies that were focusing on these sorts of artisans, and I never found anything. And so one day I said, you know what? There's nothing like this. It's time for me to just not keep it as an idea and sort of like turn it into an actual platform to support these creators. So that's how it came about. And I launched in 2019, and it's been an incredible journey so far. We represent 96 creators from about 38 countries as of today.
What are the countries that you represent your creators from?
So I'll tell you about the ones that are unique and, not the expected ones. So South Korea, Moldova, Romania, Armenia are some of the countries that, I'm especially interested because I don't feel like there is a lot of exposure given to, the arts and crafts that come from these countries, and they're exquisite. Like I said, they're beautiful. Of course, we have, countries that are always at the forefront of fashion and art, which is countries like Italy and Germany. Of course, the US, which is also a leader in fashion and art. So in all, I would say we represent the leaders, but I also have a soft corner for the countries that have still, are need to be in the global space. It's 96 so far, and I'm very excited about it.
That is so wonderful. So you have close to 100 brands now that is represented by you. So how do you physically fund them? I know that you travel a lot. So do you come to their studios? What's the process?
So, I launched in 2019 with 10 creators from 10 countries, and these were artisans that I personally knew and had connected with them during my travels. I had commissioned pieces from them just because I loved their work. And, when I would come back and wear these just, at work or at an event, 9 out of 10 times people would be very attracted to that. So these were, and I would keep giving them this feedback. And it was so heartening to see them feeling appreciated, and then over the years, I kept telling them, why are you not doing more? And I understand, that I feel like the challenge with independent creators is that they're doing everything. They're the marketing person, they're the person who's creating stuff, they're like the assistant, they're the person getting the material. So they're doing 10 roles in one. They were strapped for time, they were strapped for money. And they said, we love the idea. And initially, I wanted them to do it independently in their own little studios. And it was something that they just couldn't take off. So I spoke to them and I said, listen, I have 10 artisans. You're all on the same page. We're all bound by the same thread. What do you think of this idea? Do you think you would be supportive if I started something? And they were so excited and wholeheartedly supported me for the launch. Now, once I kicked off with these 10 artisans, it's been a slow process. 96 seems like a big number, but people don't realize it's a very slow, process. And then the number seems big. But from these 10 artisans, it was word of mouth. I also started visiting a lot of jewelry schools, a lot of fashion schools, and set up partnerships and collaborations with them, which is, the best way to find emerging artists, to be honest, and artisans. So it sort of grew from word of mouth. And now I have formal partnerships in place in Asia, Europe, and the US. And, it's an ongoing dialogue. I always tell people, this is a business, but this is more than that. This is a conversation that is going to go on for a long time. And I'm in it for life. So, we're in this process together. So as of now, I have discovered people through these partnerships. And of course, if you have worked with someone and you like the way we have worked together, it's a small world, word spreads. And that's how I found my 96 people.
Amazing. So, for those who don't know Let's Curate, so tell us more about what exactly do you do to support those independent brands?
Absolutely. This is actually an interesting story. When I kicked off in 2019, I had a very simple idea. It would be an e-shop model. I would go around the US and I would represent these people at pop-up fairs and artisan fairs. Guess what? 2020 happened and the whole world shut down. And I sort of was paralyzed for a little bit because I just launched my business and all these in-person events, everything was it was dead. And there were two ways. Either I could have folded up my company and just gone back to my corporate job, which is what I was doing before this. But there was another way. And I thought, you know what? I have all these products. People were in the middle of collections. So they didn't have a full collection. They had 3 pieces or 4 pieces. So we launched something called limited edition collections, capsule collections, which took off greatly because there were a lot of creators who had just a few pieces and they were incredibly unique. So instead of waiting for the whole collection to form, which they obviously couldn't do at that time, we launched the limited edition collection. We highlight artisans through our artisan spotlight feature. We represent them at multiple international events in New York City. And of course, we have our absolutely wonderful partnership with Flying Solo, which I think has, like I was saying, has helped me scale this up to another level, sort of giving me the space and the area to not only have a physical presence in New York City, which is cutting edge when it comes to designer, jewelry, and creative thought, but also the backing of your press team, which does such a great job in placing our jewelry in high profile fashion magazines, which is the best way to expose, sort of like an additional way to expose these creators to the global market. Lastly, I do have my all-time favorite initiative, which is my in-house exhibition. It's every year from October to December, and it involves multiple features. We do webcast interviews, podcast features. Of course, we also have physical showcases of our participant jewelry. We have collaborations with New York City Jewelry Week. We've done that a couple of times. and of course with Klimt O2, which is in Europe. So it's sort of like a package. We get them all together for 60 days. It's all about celebrating and empowering creative thought from across the world. So these are some of the ways in which we try to find the best fit. So when an artisan comes to me, we don't offer, or rather, I don't offer one option. I give them all sorts of options and they pick something that works for them at that moment, which is why I always tell them this is a long partnership. Today, this is going to work for you. Maybe next year you want to be part of the exhibition because now you have a bigger collection. The year after that, you're coming to New York City, so you want to be part of New York City Jewelry Week. So it's sort of ongoing. We build it up as we get to know the creator more over time. So yes, in a nutshell, a few of these ways to sort of capture the audience that we are looking for, an audience that appreciates the amount of time and effort these artisans take to perfect their art. It's most of them are commission pieces. Most of them take a long time from idea to the final product. So I'm looking to connect them with the right kind of buyer and customer, I would say, who appreciates that journey that they go through.
That's an incredible story. And I understand that there is obviously a personal mission behind what you do. But why do you think it's important to support independent brands on a global level?
I feel like large mass market platforms, they make the artisan anonymous. You see a lot of beautiful products on so many platforms, but you have no idea who the person is. You don't know their journey. You don't know the history, the culture, the legacy that is behind that one little ring that they may have that you're looking at and looks beautiful. They are large mass market platforms lose out on a very integral part of creation, which is being an artisan stands for love and creativity. And they sacrifice and focus a lot of time on refining and perfecting what they really are passionate about, which is lost when you're trying to compete with 1,000 makers. I think a lot of independent makers also sort of give up and either, join a brand, which is not really talking about their own mission. So I think independent artisans really need to have a space to talk about themselves, because that's how you connect a community. That's how you build a community that not only is rewarded for pursuing their own passions, but they also find the right partner who is not just a buyer. It sort of becomes like a partnership. I have artisans who started off with clay jewelry, and they one of them actually came back to me the other day and said, I'm so bored with clay, I need to do something else. But she was so terrified because she said, my entire audience expects clay based jewelry from me, and I'm really scared about making a switch. And a lot of people stop themselves from elevating themselves, and I think this is a big problem with mass market platforms, because if something clicks, they will never let that person try something else or experiment with something else. And you lose out on a lot. During COVID, I felt the only thing that kept us alive was stories. It was art, it was creativity, it was new ways of thinking, because we were trapped in our homes and there was no place to go. We couldn't travel, we couldn't do anything. And at that point, if, mass market platforms were the only things available, there was no way to come up with something new. So I think it is important for new ideas and new thought processes to come ahead. You need to reward the person behind that thought process and not just put him or her in a general category like rings or bracelets or, stuff like that. So I'm very passionate about that, as you can see. I want to tell the story, and I want people to know that this necklace was made by Elizabeth, who is from this place. And this is how she was influenced, and this is what inspired her.
Well, this is incredible. And I cannot agree more about giving designers create freedom for creativity, because so many in our experience and Flying Souls experience want to pivot at some points, but they might be afraid their audience will not like it, or they might just be afraid that it just won't work out. But reality is they need to keep experimenting in order for them to keep finding their niche and brand need to evolve, and it's part of the whole thing. So it's definitely agreeing 100% with you on that. That you just sometimes need to encourage the creative. It just go their way and see how it's all unfolds.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, with brands like you and me, I think there is a market there are people who appreciate what we're doing. We just need to make that community as large as possible and show buyers and customers the potential of, sort of letting independent people from unexpected places thrive. A lot of my artisans are from very small towns. They haven't even traveled to a major town in their own country. And it makes me sad that, they'll just stop creating and we would never have seen that part of lace crochet or metalwork that, they're just sort of like, there is no market for this, but that's not true. I feel there is a market for anything that is made with thoughtfulness, with mindfulness, with sort of honoring your legacy and your history, and then giving it your own spin.
I 100% agree with that. And I'm just really curious when a designer comes to you and they might be thinking about, for example, going to New York, and they often ask, do you think I should do it? Do you think I should go to New York? And what will be a benefit for me? So when they in that space, when they don't know they are ready to move forward, what advice do you give them?
I always tell them that for big things to happen, you have to take small steps. You have to take small steps, and these steps have to be one step ahead. So if you have been making jewelry in your neighborhood for 20 years, it's time to take one step. You go one step above. Risk taking is important. Of course, I completely understand the challenges, the financial challenges, most primarily for most people, because, traveling to New York City or even speaking to someone that you're not familiar with in another country is very daunting. But I would say find the right partners, have a little bit of an appetite for risk, and it's sort of like cautious risk. Like I say, it's sort of like a contrasting word. You don't have to go all out. So, which is why I feel like platforms like yours and mine, I give them multiple options so that they can move one step ahead as per their risk appetite. But you have to take a risk. If you don't fall when they're learning to walk, they will never walk. So you've got to have, so it's sort of like my job, I feel, is holding their hands and just sort of saying, it's going to be okay, but you need to move ahead. And these are the little ways in which you can move ahead. It doesn't have to be a giant leap. Most people assume, for me to sort of be successful or push myself a little bit, I have to come to New York City. And I always tell them, yes, you will. It is important for you to come here. But guess what? Before that, you can do these things. You can be featured in a publication in a fashion magazine in New York City. You can, participate in one artisan fair. You don't have to come to New York City. We can represent you. But the point is that you have to be mentally ready to get out of your comfort zone. You can't grow until, and it is okay to be scared, and it is okay to be worried. All those things are very good. They're all positive because they push you ahead. But I would say you have to have some risk appetite and sort of have some belief that it will. And, every experience, I always tell them, even when I'm approached by a new design, I always tell them, right now, this partnership may not be the right fit for you. But until you have had this conversation, you didn't even know that this was a possibility. Every experience is a learning experience. Even if you fail, you may think you have failed, but 5 years later, when you are in a store in New York City, you'll look back and you'll say, oh, you know what? This all started with this conversation with Let's Curate or Elizabeth. And, look where I've come now. So we have to appreciate the small moments, but you have to move one step ahead every single day.
That's an incredible advice for all those designers out there. And the last thing I really wanted to ask you, I know that a lot of our listeners are the ones that want to be designers, that may create one of your items already, but not sure if they are ready for this whole journey just yet, or if it's for them entirely. So what advice would you give them?
I would say, it's best to, when you don't want to take a really big risk, I would say start talking to people in the industry, make connections, get as much information as possible about what you're trying to do. A lot of people feel like, oh, it's my idea, I shouldn't share it with anyone because someone else is going to steal my idea. Ideas don't get you anywhere. You have to execute the idea, and that's really, really, really difficult to do. So talk about it as much as you can with people in the industry. Find different, and the world is a small place. Don't limit yourself. If there is a jewelry school that is doing something that you are doing, but it's in Asia, it's okay. They are looking for people like you. So if you don't reach out to them, they don't know you exist. Just open up your mind and, sort of try to make as many connections. And, we have the beauty of having virtual, conversations now, which was not there. Please, that is the least thing that you should be worried about. The language doesn't matter. The fluency doesn't matter. The accent doesn't matter. People are watching what you are doing. If you can show talent, if you can show your work, and in the right place at the right time, none of these things are really important. People are looking for your idea, and if your idea is sublime and exquisite, it's going to work. Don't hold yourself back with these sorts of things. Don't worry about, oh, what will people think? There's people are not thinking about you. So just go ahead and talk as much as possible. The more you speak, you also sort of refine your statement, which is important when you're presenting your work, presenting your ideas. You refine your thought process, you make connections, and it can lead you to, it would at least lead you to a bigger platform than where you are right now.
I cannot agree more with you, Magna. It's such an incredible advice to all their people that are questioning whether or not they want to go this crazy fun route of being designer, but hopefully they'll take your advice to heart and really follow it. Well, Magna, thank you so much for being on this podcast. I know that you shared so much wisdom with the independent designers, and I know that they'll learn a ton from you. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun speaking to you. And, as we sort of are on the same page, which is why I was very excited to be on your show. And I really thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Of course, thank you.